Hello again. I'm Heather.
I'm Kim.
And now that you have session 1 completed, which was what is transformative family engagement, this session number 2 focuses on why is it important and what are the barriers to achieving it.
So let's get ready to go over to the slide deck. Sorry. All right, session 1. 2, dear me, why is transformative family engagement important and what are the barriers? So one thing that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about transformative family engagement is that we live in a really changing world. Our communities are becoming more diverse, and not just in race, but in lots of different ways. And we also we're facing new challenges with raising our children. Our parents didn't have to worry about cyberbullying, but that's something that we now have to face while we're raising our children. And our schools are teaching children in a different way. It's always shifting. Think of how many different types of testing we have gone through in the past 4 or 5 years, state testing, also the different curriculum and how that has been shifting. And then also, families are connecting with information in so many different ways. Email used to be a surefire way to get a hold of somebody. Now email is not as used, and so now maybe texting is good, or is it through phone calls? There's so many different ways that we're connecting with information, and that all impacts transformative family engagement.
So national PTA research shows that members really want the focus of PTA to be on their child. So they want to know that PTA is relevant to them. So I think it's important to know that National PTA really works hard to keep their fingers on the pulse of membership and how they can best stay relevant to our families and to our members. And so I think we have also seen these bullet points be true in our PTAs, that, our members want us to use better communication and use social media more than we use email, and to somehow try to connect with families with what is important to them.
And so the Berea City School District Family Engagement Team did some research, and what we found is our big 4 areas that our parents want is they want effective and streamlined communication. They also want a better understanding of what student success looks like at every grade level, and they want to be aware of that and understand that. They also want a welcoming environment that encourages families to be active participants. And they also want to be involved in decision making. All of this information came to us through a survey that was done at the beginning of the 2018-19 school year. And these are the our kind of key areas that the family engagement team has been working on throughout this past school year.
And one thing that was really cool about this data is, and so many of you probably already know this, that this data came through the School of Excellence, right, through each PTA and school participating in that. And we were able to obtain the data from all of our schools. And while each PTA and school was focused on making improvements based on your own school results, we were looking at it in aggregate from a district perspective, which was very interesting to see, the differences between, what all of our elementary school parents responses are compared to our high school parent responses, and et cetera. So I think that was really, really helpful. And we appreciate that every PTA participated in that, because that was really the basis for what you're seeing on this slide.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. That was amazing. That was great.
So research shows, believe it or not, that family engagement is just as important as a high quality principal and a rigorous curriculum. And so this information comes from a Chicago study that was done with 600 schools over a 7-year period. And it was really about the effects that improvements have on the school. And so one thing I want to point out about this study is that, we all know that the impact that family engagement can have on our kids. We all know that the more we participate as parents, the higher their grades are going to be, the more their attendance is going to be, and all those things. But what this study showed is that it's also important for the school. And so this study found basically 5 key ingredients for an improving school. And of course, some things that we would expect were on the list of those top 5. One was like a great principal, strong teachers, that rigorous curricula, but family engagement was one of the 5. So for schools that had strong family engagement and they had programs and policies in place to drive that forward, they had a better chance of improving than schools that did not have that in place. So we know that it matters to schools that family engagement is happening.
And I think one thing to add to that is that it's not just the family's responsibility to get engaged. It also needs to be the school district's responsibility to welcome and engage families and provide opportunities for engagement. And so imagine the changes that could happen if as much energy that was put into principals and curriculum was also put into family engagement. So that was powerful research for me when I heard it first. Mm-hmm. And I just think we need to continue as parents to remind members of the schools that this is important and it's not just a parent's responsibility. So one thing to keep in mind is that not all engagement is equally effective. So we have so many differences, and we talked about this briefly before, but we have educational backgrounds that are different, race that are backgrounds, families that are different. We have grandparents that are raising kids, and the age is different. There's so many differences in our families, and we need to make sure that we're encouraging all families to be engaged. Are we offering things in a multiple language? If we have a hearing impaired student, do we have someone there to be able to sign? Are we being considerate of work schedules? Are we being aware of the need for childcare for some families to be able to attend events? Are we being aware of cliques, perceived cliques or real cliques? Just are we welcoming, or are we in the in and it's hard to be a new person in that group or in that school? And so engagement is important, that we reach out to everyone and that all feel welcome. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're the one in the trenches doing the work and you feel like there's only 5 of you who are actually really doing the work. And you 5 get really close. But reaching out and trying to get other people involved takes energy and time. And we need to be aware of all the differences that are out there.
So there are going to be some barriers that we come across when we're trying to make some inroads to transformative family engagement.
One of those is that we're doing things business as usual. How many times have we heard, well, we've always done it this way, mm-hmm. or that event we've done because we always do it. So that's a barrier that gets in the way of change.
Also, like we discussed in the first session, change is hard and it can be messy and it can be time consuming and it's a group effort. Change sometimes is controversial. because it takes time, people might want to dedicate that time to something. So yeah, change is hard.
And we are busy. We are busy, and our friends are busy, and the other parents are busy as well, and our plates are full. And sometimes thinking about doing things differently is just exhausting, and there's no room for it. And so that can be another barrier.
Mm-hmm. And, teachers, administrators, parents, we all contribute to the education system here in our district, but in a lot of times in a very siloed way. So in other words, kind of everyone has their own lane that they're driving in, and they're trying to get from point A to point B at the end of the year. And they're very focused on how it is they need to do that. And it's not very often that we cross lanes or that we find intersections where we can all kind of work together. So, and if the system reinforces that, then it makes it very difficult to kind of break through.
Another barrier is the scheduling and planning. One thing that Heather and I have talked about is how PTAs really do a lot of their planning over the summers. And that is when the teachers are off and not working. And so that's hard to put together, getting a teacher involved in an event or learning about what curriculum you could enhance with some kind of activity when the teachers and the staff aren't around to be able to do that. But there's other scheduling and planning issues as well, like considering work schedules and school schedules and all of that. So that's another barrier.
And lack of access, I think you can look at this in a multitude of ways. Sometimes it's hard to access people. If you really need a meeting with a guidance counselor or a teacher or an administrator, it might be difficult. Sometimes it's hard for us to have access to processes. We don't know everything that's going on sometimes. We don't have insight into that. And we don't always have access to resources. So, sometimes that can also be a barrier.
And the last barrier we identified, although I am sure there are more, is the mindset and the vision. And let me explain what I mean by this, is that, so Heather and I and the family engagement team have been looking at transformative family engagement for a full year. And it has opened up my eyes to a lot of different changes that we could do in the district. But prior to thinking about things differently, I knew what had been done and what we've always done. And so I wasn't shifting my mind to think of things differently or ask questions. And I didn't have a vision of where, how families could get more engaged. I couldn't see that. And so sometimes we're set in our ways or set in our vision of what we see and how we do things. And sometimes we'll need to shift that and start to question our own thoughts and how we do things.
Mm-hmm. But in the end, the effort that we all put forward is worth it, because what we get is schools and that are, going to be higher performing schools and kids that are going to be more successful in their achievement. So we like to equate this to a movement, because I know from my work with National PTA Center for Family Engagement, and we've talked about this on the family engagement team, is really, this is a grassroots movement. For whatever reason, over time, parents have kind of taken a side view or a position related to schools, and it's time for us to get reconnected and reassert ourselves into the process. So there's a couple things happening that would help you see that the movement has started. So the first one is obviously the National PTA Center for Family Engagement. Like I said before, this is a newly created center for National PTA, and this is a new priority for National PTA. And so they are devoting a lot of funds to getting this off the ground and helping it be an important resource for all families across the United States.
The other thing Heather already touched on in, I believe it was the first session, about the Chicago study, which was called Organizing Schools for Improvement, Lessons from Chicago. And they did a lot of research on following the 600 schools and they identified what made schools improve, and family engagement was one of the 5 things that truly made a difference.
Academic parent-teacher teams. This is goes by the acronym APTT, and this is really a unique way to look at parent-teacher conferences. And there's a lot of videos that you could Google or find on YouTube. It's really an innovative approach, and basically what they do is, rather than meeting with parents or family members individually, they meet with you as a group. And so they would have a workshop where you would go in and they would talk to the group of parents and caregivers about their goals as teachers, how the class is performing, where they see the class needs help, how you can help your own student at home. They would teach you techniques to be able to do that. You would practice them. They are available to answer questions, and it's a really unique way for teachers to get to know families and for families to learn how they can be best supporting their student. And, you know, it's really incredible. So I encourage you to go out and look at those.
The last part, like, for us to prove that there's a movement going on right here, is we found a lot of information from Dr. Steve Constantino, and he has a book. He has a couple books, but one particular book that is called Engage Every Family, 5 Simple Solutions. And he talks about that there are 5 simple principles. Like, the first one is the culture that engages every family. So having the culture of engagement, communicating effectively and building those relationships with families, empowering every family, so giving the families the tools they need to help and be engaged with their child's education. And then also step 4 is engaging every family in decision making, and that the families have a seat at the table in decisions that impact their children throughout their tenure in school. And then the 5th principle is engaging the greater community in the education process for our kids. And so Dr. Constantino has a wealth of knowledge, and we've pulled from that. And so we want you guys to think about what it would take to be a part of the movement. And we have a video we want to share with you about a movement.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not 2 nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So Over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, TED. Thanks.
Let me turn off that video.
I thought they were applauding for us.
Oh, well, maybe. Oh, dear. All right. Well, we're still here.
There we are.
So that was session 2.
So I hope you're all going to join the movement.
Yes,
that's, you know, because we don't want to be the lone nut and the first follower, whatever people. So we need everyone to join in. So we're going to go to the reflection.
Yeah. And so we have, so if you hear that noise, the video continued. Sorry about that. Go again to the next session 2. I think there's about 7 questions. And again, as Heather said in the last end of the video, this information that you submit to us is really important that we can pass on to National PTA. So please take the time to do that. I guess the other thing we should say is if you have any other questions, we'll make sure that our emails will be listed in the information so you can reach out to us as well. But we'll be back for session 3.
Mm-hmm.